Hey lieve luisteraar, voor je gaat luisteren naar dit nieuwe gesprek in de reeks WDYP podcast, wil ik jou graag nog iets vragen. Ik wil jou een gunst vragen, want ik wil jou graag beter leren kennen. En daarom heb ik een vragenlijst gemaakt. De link staat in de show notes. Neem er even een paar minuutjes tijd voor en laat mij weten wie dat jij bent, waarom je naar deze podcast luistert en hoe dat ik deze podcast nog beter voor jou kan maken. Alvast een hele dikke dankjewel. Ga dan nu gezellig luisteren naar een hopelijk voor jou interessant en inspirerend gesprek. Why Do You Podcast? Een podcastreeks waarin podcasters vertellen over waarom ze podcasten. Ik ben Annelies, ik ben podcastmanager en coach en ik ga in gesprek met podcastmakers uit België, Nederland en ver daarbuiten om hen te vragen naar hun why als het over podcasten gaat. Je ontdekt in deze reeks dat iedereen een eigen reden heeft om te podcasten en along the way krijg je ook heel veel tips en inspiratie om met je eigen podcast aan de slag te gaan. Luister je mee? Hello Derek, welcome to Why Do You Podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me. Wonderful to be here.
Yeah, it's nice to see you again in my virtual studio. We met a month ago at Radio Days in Athens, and it was we had a really good conversation already about your podcast. But now it's going to be an official one for my podcast. So tell all the listeners, what is your podcast about, and what's the name of your podcast show?
Yeah, we'll do. So the name of the podcast is What Are You Doing in Denmark? And it's a little bit of a cheeky title because that's a question that we often get asked in Denmark as people who move here from elsewhere. So the audience is really for the international community or the expat community living in Denmark. And in Danish, the expression is Hvad laver du i Danmark? Or what are you doing in Denmark? Essentially, it means, why did you move here? What do you do for work, I guess? It's more of like a what brought you to Denmark. But it's funny because when you translate it into English, it has a little bit of a different, at least the sound is a little almost accusatory. Like, why are you here? What are you doing here? Almost like you caught somebody in your house in the middle of the night, like a burglar. And you're like, what are you doing here? So it's a little bit cheeky, a little bit of a play on that, and almost a way to reclaim it as like, hey, like we are all doing really cool things here. We're all going through similar experiences. And I think kind of the purpose is to, again, not just sort of reclaim that in the title, but also to hear people's stories so that people who do move here feel a little bit less alone. And I think part of the reason that's necessary is because Denmark is a wonderful country. I think they do a very good job of marketing themselves as wonderful. We all hear about hygge and the work-life balance. I think very similar across Northern Europe, but I think Denmark does a very good job of putting those stories out there. But the reality for international people is that it's just as difficult to move to Denmark as it would be to move to another country. Moving countries is always a wonderful experience and very rewarding, but can also be challenging and comes with a different set of challenges in even a country like Denmark, where it's considered very cushioned and easy to live. That's true, but there's still the same things you would experience moving anywhere and some unique challenges breaking into Danish society. So that's sort of the purpose.
Yeah, it might be like an easy living place, but it's still different than what you are used to, I guess. Yeah.
100%. I've been here 8 years. I moved to Denmark in 2017, and it is still something that almost every week there's something where I'm like, oh, I did not know that. Oh, I didn't realize I was doing this wrong. Now it becomes less intense. It becomes maybe fewer things that occur to me where I'm like, oh, I was doing that wrong for years. But but there's always these little things where I'm like, oh, I'm giving a weird impression to people, or, oh, I didn't realize that unwritten rule of what I should be doing in the grocery store, or things like that. And of course, the things that you just don't really get used to, and
Yeah.
the
And so,
challenges you get everywhere. Yeah.
yeah. And so those are also the things that you talk about in your podcast.
Yes,
Um,
100%. So,
yeah.
there are many things that will come up organically during conversations. There's some things where we'll podcast and do episodes on just topical things that are going on in the news, especially as they relate to the international community here. And then sometimes we'll do deep dives on topics that a lot of people struggle with, like how do you make friends in Denmark? And again, it's challenging to do that anywhere to start over, especially
Yeah.
as an adult to make friends. But there's some unique things about Danish society or the way that friendships are viewed and gone about in Denmark that can make it, oh, yes, a bit of an extra layer of challenge for people who move to Denmark from abroad.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate a little bit because yeah, I'm Belgium and I'm Belgian and I always lived in Belgium, but I moved to another city 3 years ago. And then yeah, so you also have to make new friends, even if you know the culture, but it's still not easy to make new friends because all friend groups usually exist since what, like high school or something, and then you
Yeah,
feel like you're breaking into a group. Yeah. So all my new
exactly.
friends in my new city are all expats because they were also all looking for new friends.
Interesting. Yeah, I think
So
it's so true. And you say high school. I think it's an interesting and unique thing in Denmark is that often they'll be in the same cohorts, the same class makeup of the people in their classes for even going back farther to grade school all the way through. So sometimes it's like they finish their schooling with these friends that they've had for 10, 15 years. Sometimes I have Danish friends who will say, my mother met my best friend's mother in their mom's group from the hospital.
yeah,
So before they were even born,
yeah,
their mothers became friends and they've known each other literally their entire lives.
yeah,
How do you break into a friend circle like that? It's pretty
yeah,
unique to Denmark and in a country where it's already a smaller country. It's already a country with sort of an insular society that becomes even more of a challenge when you move here and then have to not only start over making friends as an adult, but then have to figure out the Danish approach.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. And is your partner also American or
no, oh yeah, I
yeah?
apologize. Yes, he is
Yes.
American. So we moved here for his. Yes, my partner is also American. We moved here for his job in 2017. He was working for the company's global headquarters in Philadelphia, and they had acquired a Danish entity, a Danish firm, and immediately needed help with the merger. The
Yeah.
cultural merger, I think, was a bit difficult too. They made some assumptions of what it would be like, oh, everyone speaks English. We'll do things exactly the same way.
Ah,
Well,
yes. Yeah.
that
No,
fell
that
apart.
yeah, yeah. No, but
Very American.
I'm asking
Yeah, go ahead.
because my partner is also from another country. He's Portuguese, living in Belgium almost 7 years now, and then we met when he was here, for about 1 year, so we've been together 6 years now. He's been in Belgium 7 years, but I think it's maybe a bit easier for him because, yeah, I'm local, and when you're so I can teach him a lot about Belgian
Or
culture and introduce him to my friends and my circle. So I think maybe and still after 7 years, he's still asking me questions. How does this work in Belgium, and how do you act in a situation like this? But yeah, he has someone to ask. So
yeah,
yeah,
it's sometimes funny. I often think I often think, what would I prefer to have sort of a guide who could could help me,
yeah,
or would I rather have somebody who really understands and can empathize precisely with what I'm going through because we come
yeah,
from the same background? I think there's some advantage in both.
yeah, probably, yeah. All right, back to the podcast. You started out, you told me, as only a YouTube channel, and then it grew into also a podcast. How did that happen?
Yeah, correct. Exactly. I feel like often a lot of podcasters are turning to YouTube
Yeah.
And I sort of went in the other direction. So it was during, if we all remember, the year of 2020.
Yes, we do.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So in Denmark, we had two lockdowns during the pandemic, and in the first one, I did all the normal things. Everybody was baking bread and drinking too much wine and watching Tiger King and all of that. And then things opened up for the summer, and that was lovely. And then when things shut down again in the end of the year, uh, my partner and I thought, okay, no more bread. let's uh, let's try something else. So we decided to just start making YouTube videos. And at first, we really thought, okay, it's only going to be our friends and family watching, but it'll be a nice way to keep in touch and sort of show them what's going on for us here, and a nice way to spend our time. And we did that, starting the first one we put out in the week between Christmas and New Year's. And by March, it kind of, I don't want to say, but we had our first video that maybe had a little bit of virality, and it quickly monetized, and our channel grew very fast. And so then for about 2 years, we were together putting out one episode a year. Sorry, we were putting out one episode a week, one episode a week, for about 2 years, and then some opportunities came to potentially explore a podcast with an agency. That fell through. And then maybe 6 months later, a studio reached out and had said to us, hey, really like what you're doing on YouTube. Would you be interested in starting a podcast? We can help you with the production part of it, but it'll be completely on your own, but you have the channels to promote it. You have a following. Why don't you give it a shot? So we did. And it's
Yeah.
been great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a really nice extension of what we were already doing on YouTube, and I think it's nice that we get to explore a different format, and get to do, a deeper dive into topics that we had sort of been talking about in conversations we've been having for years, and then also to have a different approach where we can bring in experts and bring in other voices, and also interview other expats that are going through a similar thing here.
So, but you do have the same content on YouTube as in the podcast apps.
Yes, so
Yeah.
we also upload a YouTube version of each podcast episode, and then we have the audio versions streaming on all of the platforms. And of course, we take a different approach. I think setting up a podcast show and a podcast episode is a bit different, but it's nice to have sort of the transferable skills that I could bring over from a background in YouTube into the podcast,
Yeah.
because a lot of things that I think many podcasters struggle with in the early part, as far as uh, say not stepping and cross talking with other guests, and how to formulate a show for retention to keep it interesting, how to explore topics in a way that is engaging and entertaining. I kind of had a little bit of background in that from YouTube, and it's definitely been very helpful to have that as I started the podcasting.
All right. Yeah, and I think an advantage you already have also doing it the other way around, because another struggle for a lot of podcasters going to YouTube, I think, is that they don't really understand what YouTube's needs are, or the different expectations of viewers on YouTube. Like you don't only need a podcast cover or an episode art, you also need, well, not you don't need episode art, you need a thumbnail, a YouTube
Yeah.
thumbnail. And with a totally different approach than you would do for podcast art. Yeah. So you already know how to do that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting how on the surface it seems like it's so similar,
But
but
it is
once
not.
you kind of, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
completely different thing. Yeah, yeah. A lot of transferable skills, but figuring out the different personalities of each platform, and or each sort of media format, has been interesting, and it's been
Yeah.
a nice a nice challenge. It still is something that I think even YouTube has changed a lot in the 4 years that I've been YouTubing actively. So very interesting how uh, it all interacts, and it all is influenced by short form content, and I think that even influences podcasts and finding the right clips. And how do you take a 40-minute conversation and boil that down into a 90-second clip to share on short form or to share on YouTube Shorts? And how do you? It's been really interesting to experiment with different things and see how each type of media influences the others.
Yeah, I agree. It's continuous learning, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun. Some of it is just a trial and error and
Yeah.
experimenting and seeing what works.
Okay. So, did you, because you said the YouTube channel grew very fast in the beginning. Did you experience the same with the on the podcast platforms?
Yeah, actually, it did go very well at first, and I think it still has. But I think there was an advantage in sort of having a following and having a community already. We were able to do a lot of pre-promotion as well, and we launched in September. Well, I think it was the last week in August when we launched the podcast. So we were able to record episodes in the summer previously, or the summer before that rather, and then sort of drip out promo and drip out clips of what was coming, and that was exciting as well. So we could really sort of move our audience over initially, and then it really grew. Um, I think because we had done video from the beginning. That really helped us when we didn't have a presence on any of the podcast platforms. That we had some video content that we could repurpose into short form. That we could put the episodes on YouTube. All of that, I think, in tandem, really helped us to have a good launch.
But yeah, and I think it's a different audience, because you said, yeah, we already had a following on YouTube, but probably those are not the same people that are following you on the podcast platforms.
Exactly,
Yeah,
and of course there is some crossover,
yeah,
of course, but I think it's that also, as much as those skills helped to have, and as much as social media has been a part of promotion, there are many people who will even admit to me, even friends will admit, like, "Oh, yes, I saw that you had this person on the podcast. That must have been exciting." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, what did you think when they said, XYZ?"
yeah,
And they'll be like, "Oh, I only saw the clip on Instagram or something." And I'm like, yeah, okay." So I think you have to keep that in mind too. It's wonderful to be able to move an audience over, but just because you have a lot of Instagram followers doesn't mean you're going to have a successful podcast, or just because you have a presence on YouTube doesn't mean you're going to have a successful podcast. It just means people will be aware that you have a podcast. They may not listen, they may not like podcasts. So you really do, I think, um, regardless. And it may sound contradictory to what I was saying previously, but you really do have to think about your podcast community as a separate community. And there will be crossover, but it's a different group of people.
yeah. That's a good tip, actually, because I was also talking to someone, and they said, yeah, I have people following me on TikTok, and I put clips of my podcast on TikTok, but those people have never listened to a full episode of my podcast. They only watch the
Yeah.
clips on TikTok, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine. It's also visibility, and they are aware that you have a podcast. So maybe someday when they decide, oh, today is the day I'm going to listen to a podcast, maybe it will be yours. Yeah,
Exactly. It's like
yeah,
I'm trying to think of um, a commercial that would be well known. Perhaps like Doritos, for example. Like, I don't buy Doritos very often. I certainly don't buy a bag of Doritos every week, but I'm aware of Doritos because they advertise on the channels that I watch and things like that. So yes, I could probably by memory draw a picture of what they look like or what the bag of Doritos looks like because I'm exposed to it a lot. But I wouldn't say that them advertising, at least through me, has particularly increased their sales, at least in my household. But I think it's similar to that, where yeah, that social media aspect makes people aware of the podcast, but it certainly doesn't generate much beyond awareness.
yeah.
One view on TikTok or one view on Instagram does not lead to a one-to-one ratio of podcast downloads for sure.
No, no, but I think creating the awareness is you have to start somewhere. Yeah.
100%.
So if you enjoy doing the clips and then why not use them?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I would say, I may have clips that will do super well. Maybe we'll have between um, multiple platforms, we'll have maybe 200,000 views. But I mean, it's maybe will give me, a difference that I'll notice on that few days where it's circulating. I'll notice that it's maybe giving me an extra 250 downloads. So what
Yeah.
is that? Less than 1%? Yeah.
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 Yeah. But still, I think if
You have to do
as
it. You
long
have to
as
do it, but
well, I'm not saying you have to because I don't do it, and
sure.
my podcast is growing also in a different way.
Absolutely.
I focus more on the SEO side to
Yeah.
be discovered, or on well, I should make more of an effort on that thing. So open invitation, inviting myself here. I want to be guesting more on other podcasts because that's
I,
also a good growth strategy. Uh, but yeah, I focus more on those things and connecting with other people, and growing that way. It
yeah.
goes maybe slower. I don't know. But as long as there's
I
growth,
know.
I'm
I
fine.
would, yeah. And I
Yeah.
would actually say, it's an, it's a yes and approach. It's all of
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, I think if anybody that's listening is not a social media person, they don't, they like doing an interview, they like podcasting, but they don't necessarily want to be in front of a camera, or they don't want to be taking out their phone and doing vertical format short
Mhm.
form videos. I totally understand that. Do what's natural for you. I think guesting, like you said, is a very good way to build your audience and make people aware of your podcast and to find new people, because you also know that they're already podcast listeners. Like I
Yes.
said, it's a small portion of people that, yeah, I will have so many people say, "Oh, I saw your clip," but like I said, so few of them are actually like, "Oh, and then I went and listened to the
Yeah.
entire episode." But if you know that you're reaching podcast people who are already listening to a podcast, even if it's that group of people are much more inclined to then queue up an episode from your show next. And if they discovered your show by you guesting on that podcast, then what was it? Maybe 40 minutes of your time, an hour of your time that you gave up to reach that whole new audience. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And fun because I like talking to other
And
people.
that
So
too.
yeah.
Y That too. You're also getting that's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
also networking, it's seeing how other people operate, it's
Yeah.
getting even just tips and experience
Yeah.
from what
Yeah.
other people are doing. I
Yeah.
100% agree.
And you learn a lot from every conversation because when you're a guest on on another show, usually it's to also share your expertise, but you always learn something from the conversation you have also. So you share what you know, but you also always get something back. So yeah,
Exactly.
I love it. Yeah. So
Yeah,
if anyone hears this, want to talk about podcasting on your show, invite me.
there you go.
Yeah. Uh, so, what are things that you have learned or that you see as gifts that you got from doing your show?
I think some of the greatest gifts are just when, um, I know that I'm helping people. You know? I think that's not to sound like, "Oh, it's just all of this altruistic," obviously, I love being able to, engage with others. I think I naturally have this, uh, drive to reach more viewers. I'm watching my metrics and all of that and getting better at the skill, of course, and being able to attract, you know, really interesting guests is always nice. But I think that the most important thing that I feel like I've achieved is just when people will reach out and say, "Your podcast has helped me so much as I've been thinking about whether or not my family should take this offer and move." For me, especially just thinking of, you know, why do I podcast? Just thinking about that in preparation of our conversation today. I often think of a friend of mine that I went to school with. And we were friends in high school. We sort of lost touch when we went to university and as we started our professional lives. But, we kept in touch like most people do on Facebook and social media. And he reached out to me maybe about a year and a half into my time living in Denmark. And he said, "Hey, it's been a while, but I hope you're well. My company has asked me if I would take a job offer." And actually, it was in Belgium. And so a little connection.
Yeah.
And would you be willing to have a conversation? Do you think we could chat about this? And we had gone back and forth on different times. We actually were not able to FaceTime, but I answered some questions that both him and his wife had about our experience here in Denmark. Obviously, they're different countries. I know that. But just in general about the expat experience, things that they should maybe keep in mind or blind spots that they may have about it. And there were other factors involved, but to make the story a little bit shorter, they left about 9 months into the experience. And I don't know that I would have been able to do anything different if I had more conversations with him, if we had met in person, if my partner and I went to visit them. I don't know that that would have made any difference. It may have just not been right for them and their family and their situation. But I think of him front of mind all the time. And I think, we often hear, and anybody creating, whether it's a podcast or YouTube, to have an avatar, have somebody that you think of as your target audience that you're speaking to. And for me, uh, nobody else is going to be as important as him as that avatar. I still, I can think of it from a marketing perspective and like, oh, my avatar is um, internationals that are at this education level, this income level in this city. No, I think my friend that I grew up with who was not able to make it living internationally, and what did he need to hear? And how could I have helped him if he was listening to my show?
Yeah.
And that's what I think of first and foremost, and that's why I do it. So, um, I guess maybe when I do get these emails from people or these DMs from people, or even just people sometimes will stop me on the street or at an event and say, "Your podcast has helped me so much." To me, that's the biggest achievement. I know that sounds so corny and pie in the sky. I don't care about sponsorships or being recognized or, selling out a live show. These are all wonderful things. But the thing that really matters the most to me is that I'm making content that my friend probably needed. I'm making a show that I probably needed when I first moved here. And for people to feel like they're not alone in this experience, and that even if I'm just in their ear for an hour a day, that they, during that hour, feel like they can relate and they're part of a community because they are. And that community is much bigger than just me and my show, but that they feel connected to this group of people who need a little support.
Yeah. So
As far as that was a long-winded way of saying, yeah, that. But to me, that's the biggest achievement.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's and do you also get something out of it for yourself? Like, have you had meetups with your community that you created around the show, where you also maybe get something back
Yeah,
other than
we
a feeling of satisfaction?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have had meetups. We have had and have just started doing meetups and live shows. We plan to do a lot more of that. Um, and yeah, that has been really wonderful to kind of feel the energy and feel that going on.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, because I can imagine even how long have you been there? 8 years, you said?
8 years, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine even now you still need some support yourself in certain situations, or yeah, it's just nice to talk to someone who's in the same situation, or talk to fellow Americans, or yeah,
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 100%.
yeah.
We had a guest about a year ago who is a psychotherapist and mental health advocate, and she works with the specifically works with the expat community in Denmark. And having her on literally felt like myself and my co-host were doing therapy like live in or I
Cool.
guess in person in the studio with her. But it was not just again fantastic and valuable to have a guest like that on that could really speak to the mental health struggles, but even point out some things that I don't always realize that I'm going through and that are important to me. And obviously, I know that that really was impactful and helpful for listeners. Her story was really interesting because was she is Danish, but she and her family spent years living in Switzerland, and during that time, it was a bit difficult. And she explained a lot of the struggles that we all go through of like, how do you retain your culture and have sort of these third culture children that you're bringing up? How do you make sure that, for her story, that they were sufficiently Danish while living in Switzerland and did not feel like they were being kind of outcast because they had certain birthday traditions they weren't doing. And then when when she moved, her and her husband eventually moved back to Denmark with their children. Like, how do they reintegrate the children? And then some of their personalities or and traits that their children had were sort of influenced by this time in Switzerland. So how do they do fondue while eating open face sandwiches? I don't know. They had to manage all of these things that we often go through and don't realize we're going through. Um, and it was really poignant for her to share that part of the reason that she went into this field is because she did end up going through a divorce. And part of that was because of this process. And, that's kind of what sparked her journey of going into mental health for specifically expats. And so just being able to meet some fascinating guests that can help not just me but the community and the listeners by sharing their stories is so valuable. I don't even like to think of it as networking. I really just think of it as like adding other voices to the community and being able to share those voices that can really be impactful.
Yeah. It's amazing, that you can do that with something as, well, air quotes, simple as
Yeah,
a podcast conversation.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really the value and the achievement of like, okay, this on its surface is okay, I had a 45-minute conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
But really in the process, it's like you don't even know the impact that it's having. And it's nice when people do take a little bit of time and just say to you, like, hey, this really helped me. You have no idea how valuable it was to hear about this. And sometimes it's even just knowing, I know I've said it a few times now, but just knowing that you're not alone is really good. So and I think the shows, when I think of the podcasts that I like the most, obviously sometimes I just want the political or the true crime, but sometimes it's also just a podcast that really makes me feel like, okay, like I'm part of something. This is speaking to me and my community, and oh, I get this. I've had that experience. When it can be that relatable and authentic, I feel like that's like the sweet spot.
So, I'm also wondering, because we've been talking a lot about making impact and having fun creating content, but has anything ever gone wrong? Have you had any bloopers or blunders that you want to share?
Oh yeah, no, actually, everything's been perfect. No, yeah, of course. There's so many things, and I think I don't know. They're probably relatable. A lot of times, I think having a show where you bring on a guest can open up all kinds of different variables and different things that could go wrong. I think, and as you bring in more people, that always opens up more opportunity for things to go awry. I Often, it'll be where maybe, somebody has to cancel and you've got studio time booked or something like that. That's, obviously something that's happened before, or somebody's kids got sick and can't make it, and then I'm scrambling to figure out what I'm gonna do. But sometimes really cool things can come out of that, where maybe I'll do, basically just throw out the script. We're just bringing on, this person who can come in last minute, and we're gonna do it. And then, it can be interesting to then you're experimenting with sort of a different format, sometimes a looser planned show. I have a tendency to overplan. I was a teacher in my previous life, so sometimes I overplan, and it's also a nice lesson of like, wow, things, just like in the classroom, sometimes a kid throws up on the floor in the middle of a lesson, and you need to calm everybody down. You need to
Yeah.
be the leader, and then you have to say, okay, we only have 15 minutes of class left, and I have 30 minutes of things to go over. We're going to have to readjust and make it all work. And, that ability to kind of think on your feet does come in handy with podcasting.
Yeah.
Well, those are the things that sometimes it'll go wrong, and it's like, well, no, maybe this is actually a really cool opportunity. Um, and that can happen with guests as well, where you have some guests that are not used to podcasting. I think, you must have a nice experience interviewing podcasters who are a bit used to
Yeah.
this. I
This is
think that,
easy. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes you bring on somebody, I've had experiences where I bring somebody on who like does not have a lot of media training or does not, or maybe will, shoot me a message later and just say, hey, I said something in that episode that may not come off right. I don't want to insult my business partner because I said da 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 da, and I'm like, oh, that's not a problem. You know, I can work around that. But then there's times where it's like, but that was such a good story. I want to, that's such a vital part of it. And now I'm having to cut this really cool 10-minute segment out because and of course, like I'll kind of yield to what the guest wants, or maybe try to balance it out.
Yeah.
But those things happen.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Also, these conversations in Why Do You Podcast are really easy because, as you say, I'm talking to experienced podcasters. So, but on my other show, which is also in Dutch, called Podcast Growth, translated to English, um, I invite guests because they're an expert on something that
Mm,
I don't maybe know that much about. So I invite them for their expertise, but sometimes they don't have a podcast of their own, and they're not used to even recording and the
yeah,
tools that you use, and so that's a whole different conversation sometimes, and it takes a bit longer to make them feel at ease and comfortable, and also you have to do a lot more um, editing in episodes sometimes. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
No, 100%.
yeah.
Even that can be challenging where, I always try to, especially when I have a new guest that I've never worked with before come on, to say like, hey, I just want you to know, please don't take anything the wrong way. If I cut something out, it's going to be because I know the flow of the show and I know the style of the show. And I just want to be clear with you up front that if we're going to have a conversation, I emailed you some questions. It's not a script. We're going to go where the conversation goes. However, I'm also going to edit the conversation. So if it's going somewhere that's a little too far um, of a tangent, then I may edit it. Please don't take that the wrong way. It doesn't mean that what you and I talked about wasn't funny or a good conversation. It just wasn't suitable for uh, this audience or this show, and that's why. Sometimes I'll have people who will, and maybe you've gone through this too, where people will say, whether I meet them in person or they'll just send me a DM and be like, "Oh, I really want to come on your show. Can you have me on?" And that's wonderful. And sometimes, um, when you sort of ask them back, like, "Well, like why?"
Yeah.
And I sometimes would almost take a little bit of I would take a little bit of umbrage with them saying like, "Oh, you should have me on," and I'd be like, "Well, what are you going to talk about? What is your expertise? What is your, oh, I just want to talk about my life here." And I'm like, "Okay, well, everybody that comes on does talk about their life here, so that's a valid thing that they thought." In a way, I would originally take it almost like, not insulted, but I would almost be like, you don't understand all of the work that goes into it, the thought that I put into who I'm booking to bring on, the expertise that they have, and why I'm crafting this type of episode to be included in the show. And then I realized, like, no, how nice is it that these listeners are hearing these conversations and just want to be a part of it? Like, that's a nice thing that they are engaged, that to them it sounds like people just come on and have these conversations. They don't realize that I'm preparing questions, we're playing a game, we're doing whatever, or that this person is an expert in, whether it's mental health or rental agreements and relocations, or an expert in immigration law or things like that, or a stand-up comedian who like really knows Danish culture but comes from England or something. Like it's a nice thing that they don't realize everything that's going on. And I would almost take it the wrong way at first. Like, you don't realize what work I put into this to think that you just come and sit down in this chair and we talk about life. But the fact that it sounds like that to them is actually a compliment,
That's
And
true. Yeah.
when I kind of changed the perspective, I was like, good. I'm glad that people feel like they could just come on and sit down and have this conversation. I don't care that they don't realize there's a lot more to it. And most of the people that come on have some media training or have done interviews before or have expertise or wrote a book or do stand up or have expertise in a field or have presented or done TED Talks or things like that. So I don't I don't take it that way anymore, but that took me a little bit to get to and realize that it's a compliment.
Yeah. But then you do sometimes say, no, you cannot be a guest on my show. Yeah.
It's a tough thing to say, right? It's a tough thing to say no, because you don't ever want to say, but sometimes I will sort of put it back on them. Like, what is there? Sometimes I'll say, is there somewhere else where you've either been on a podcast or presented, or is there a topic you'd like to go over, and where can I find something else you've done? Almost the same way that it's kind of like, okay, yeah, do you have a reference? Do you have something that I could listen to that you've been on before, or something that you created that I can listen to before? I don't care if you have 100,000 followers on an app or if you have 1,000. Like, if you have something interesting to say and you have an expertise and you can do something for the audience, what would you like? Make it easy for me, and then sure. And sometimes I think that does separate the people who are just like, I really like your show and I relate to it, and the stories that I hear on your show remind me of my life, and I'd love to share my life. I think that's wonderful. And then I also find ways, are you familiar with SpeakPipe or any of the other ways that people can contribute a question? Okay,
Yes.
so sometimes I'll say to that, like, is there something that you would like to discuss or have us discuss? If you have some thoughts, here's a link where you can send in a question, and maybe we can use that in an episode. And I'll say, like, I would say it's rare that somebody will actually take me up on that.
Yeah.
Sometimes people ask me questions and they're very willing to, where I'll say, like, okay, here's my quick answer, but I'd love to discuss this in an episode. Can you, take this link and just leave us a voice note with the same question? And I'd love to do a whole episode on it. And they're very eager to do, and that's super nice. But sometimes when the person messages me to come on and I'm like, I don't know who you are, but maybe I'll say, like, okay, maybe I'll offer that. Like, okay, well, it looks like you do have an interesting story. If you want to maybe share it here, we can talk about it on the show.
Yeah.
And they almost never do,
Yeah.
which makes me think, like, well, then you weren't very serious about it, but I'll let
Yeah.
you figure that out
Yeah.
on your
Yeah.
own, because I don't want to say, saying no is always uncomfortable, and I don't want to,
Yeah. Yeah. Saying no is not. Yeah. It is uncomfortable. For this show, I don't have to do it. I only had to do it once because I got a booking for a recording from someone who didn't have a podcast. And the show is called Why Do You Podcast? It's not called Why Don't You Podcast? So, yeah,
Right.
everyone can be my guest. The only rule is you need to have a podcast. Yeah. So, because if you have one, then we can have a talk about your podcast. But
Right.
if you don't have one, yeah, what are we gonna talk about?
You don't have to
So,
check all the boxes, but you have to check this one box.
one box. Yeah, it's not that hard. But so one time I did have to say, sorry, I'm gonna cancel this booking because you don't have a podcast. But get back to me when you do have one, and if I can help you launch one, also I'm available. But
Right, exactly. Yeah. Step one, have a podcast.
have a podcast. It's my only box that you have to check. Is have a podcast.
It's a big one.
So I've only had to say no to a guest applicant once, but and even then it's a clear rule, but even then it's not easy because
It's in the name of the show.
yeah, it is.
But I get it. It's still uncomfortable.
Yeah,
It's a tough thing. But yeah.
yeah. So we've been talking about all different aspects of podcasting and YouTube also. What do you think is the most important ingredient of a good, successful podcast?
Authenticity is what I think matters the most. There have been times where I have gone into the studio, and often when I do, we'll do like a 3-hour session. So in that time, we may record 3 episodes. And there are times where by the end, and I can hear a difference when I'm listening back or preparing the show for editing or anything that I'm doing to it or looking for clips, for example, where I'm like, okay, this sounds like we're just struggling. Our energy is low. We're at work. It doesn't sound authentic. It just sounds like we're trying to get through an outline. And that's where, I think authenticity can mean a lot of things, but it has to be something that you're really interested in and really passionate about. And you can tell when you're not. And sometimes I can tell that's because maybe the energy is off, the vibes are down. Maybe the vibes are off, the energy is down, and we're just not there. And it's like, no, we need to just take a break. Let's go get a coffee, and then we'll come back and sit down, and then kind of pick things up. So I think like that's just the most important part is that like you can tell when somebody's not feeling it when they don't want to be there. Sometimes I did like an episode where in one like segment it just seemed like we were kind of dragging, and we took a small break. We filmed the rest of it. Like we moved our mics up and we did like the last 10-minute segment that we had to do standing up. And that like shift just it just felt it felt freeing or fun or just something
Yeah,
about it just changed, and it was like, oh cool. I feel like we just really got out what we were like. We just had a more fun conversation. It just felt authentic. It didn't feel like we were trying to go through bullet points. It felt like we were really doing a fun show. And I think just little things like that can make a big difference. So yeah, I think authenticity, people can tell if you really care about what you're talking about. People can tell if you're really energized, if you're really engaged, and it makes them it's so weird because, even in an audio format, people can tell if you're smiling and having fun, and if you like each other and you want to be there. And sometimes the vibes are off and you have to do something to change them.
yeah, and I can relate. And also, um, batch recording is not always a good idea,
Ye-
especially when you have guests. I think
Yes.
because
Yeah.
it's I put a lot of energy in a conversation, and I try to make it very personal. But then when I just started this show almost 2 years ago now, I did do batch recording. I sometimes had
Mm,
3 or 4 recordings in one day. Yeah, it was a lot
yeah.
because I started recording in May, and I wanted to have a lot of episodes to get through the whole summer because I
Sure.
was taking a long vacation that summer.
Yeah.
So so that's why I did it on purpose. But then afterwards I felt, when you're in the third conversation of the day, again connecting with another person, even it's not the person, it's nothing personal, but it's just you've already had 2 conversations about a topic that I'm obviously passionate about, but there's limits in
Yeah.
talking about it. So yeah, there's a difference in the first episode you record that day and the third or the fourth one, and it has nothing to do with the guest, but all just it's me and my energy level. Yeah.
A
So
million percent.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've learned not to do that anymore. I've limited my calendar options to one a day, and that's fine. And now usually I have 1 or 2 a week, and like the
Brilliant.
next 2 weeks I'm gonna take a break because there's a school vacation here in Belgium the next 2 weeks. for Easter. And well, I don't have any kids, but I do have nephews and nieces that I want to spend some time with also.
Yeah.
So I'm taking a break from recording for 2 weeks, and that's also
As you should.
fine.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah.
I'm doing the same. Yeah, I'm going away during that break period as well, and I'm like, no, I'll do a little extra work in the beginning and then put it aside.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we have our 100th episode coming up, and we're doing a
Oh,
big live. Yeah, in May it'll be yeah. So if anybody's in Copenhagen and listening and interested in coming out, it's on May 6th in Copenhagen, at Comedy Zoo. But with that coming up, I think we've got a bit of a backlog of evergreen episodes that have been recorded, and I think we're going to experiment with doing some virtual recordings for the things that are more timely in April, and just not do any studio time so that we can focus on obviously the break and then prepping for our 100th episode live show, which will be really
yeah.
cool. And that, and I think it's important though to know those times where it's like, if you even if you do upload every week, can you repurpose an episode, or can you share an episode from your back catalog uh, that maybe nobody's listened to, but it's timely for that week, to just give yourself a break, or just don't upload that week. I mean, look, I know that's tough for us in this industry to think, oh no, I cannot miss. I upload on Tuesday mornings. I cannot miss that. I understand that feeling. Trust me. And YouTube is very similar in that way. But when you realize that it's doing something authentically or sounding like you're burned out and and not fun to listen to, if those are your two options, then it's like, I totally think everybody needs a break.
Yeah.
Experiment with what works for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I totally agree. I was like that in the beginning also. I have to have an episode every week. And in the beginning it was even every day, because when I launched this podcast it was daily. That's also why I batch recorded
Wow.
so many episodes in the beginning.
Daily. Oh
Yeah,
my
daily. 7 days a week. Yep.
God.
Yep. I'm a podcast manager and
Hey.
podcast marketing expert, and I want to experiment also with frequencies of
Yeah.
launching new episodes.
Did you find that helped with growth,
Yeah,
or
it
was
does.
that
It
just
does.
okay? Okay. Well,
You
that's good
grow a
to know.
lot faster.
I'm
Yeah,
sure,
but you
but it's
also
not
burn out a lot
sustainable.
faster.
That's how they get you. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if it's so much fun to do. Yeah, I also have a business to run. So, and
Right.
a life outside of
Yeah, I was gonna say,
podcasting.
end a
Yeah.
life run.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't
So
do that.
so yeah, now it's a weekly, but like the next 2 weeks there's not gonna I was hoping to not record during the Easter break, but
Hmm.
do put episodes out. But in the last weeks I've had some cancellations or postponed recordings because people was sick, or guests canceling for different reasons. So yeah, I don't have any for the Easter break. But
That
that's
may be a
okay.
nice,
My listeners can have a break too.
a
And
blessing in disguise, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
my,
Or
my
repurpose.
listener,
I think it's so smart to just say, "Hey, I'm pulling something out of the archives, and we're gonna put that up because it's Easter, and
yeah, but
we'll be back next week."
I did that in January because
Yeah.
also there I had some issues with booking guests and not having enough guests. So in January, every week I had an old episodes that I chose my personal favorites and had those back. But now Easter, it's gonna be nothing. No, my listeners can also have a break, and there's
Yeah.
almost 150 episodes that they can listen to. So I think
You
there's
didn't
enough. Yeah,
disappear.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I'll be back after the Easter break, and then this will be the first episode after the Easter break.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, but yeah, totally agree. Authenticity is obviously an answer that I get a lot to this
Yeah.
question, but it's really fascinating that everyone gives their own explanation or to it, or yeah. Everyone looks at what it means in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it is a universal
Yeah.
concept, a universal word, but I'm sure that, it probably has a different meaning,
Yeah.
a unique meaning for different people. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very fascinating. Yeah. All right. Um, we've come to the end of our conversation. I've asked you everything I wanted to know. I think only two more small, tiny questions. Well, we've already established your podcast is on YouTube and on all the major podcast platforms. If there was one episode that you would recommend to start with, the first one, or maybe a random episode number, which one would that be?
I would say to start with, and I mentioned a few of my favorites, but one that really went well and performed well here was on making friends in Denmark. It actually got picked up by Berlinske, one of the major newspapers here, which was really cool. And they did a little, a feature on the topic and the episode. But it's called "You Can't Make Friends in Denmark Because You're a Pete." And in the and in the episode, I don't want to spoil it, but we talk about a sociological metaphor, which is that there are some cultures that are peach cultures and some that are coconut cultures. And
Okay.
it talks about, and it's a really interesting dive. I did that with, we have a rotating group of co-hosts, and Annie Samples, who is just fantastic. And she's a mom of four in Denmark. She's also American. She was my co-host for that episode, and she was fantastic. We had a really cool conversation, and that's one that I think would really resonates and also helps people to understand how friendship is approached in different cultures.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be Denmark. I think it's just a good thing to understand
Yeah.
how we all approach friendships from a different angle.
Okay. Yeah, all right. We will find that one, the one with the peach. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. So the show is "What Are You Doing in Denmark?" And then the episode is "You Can't Make Friends in Denmark Because You're a Peach." And
All right.
I can try to find the episode number, but
well, people will. There is a search bar or
yeah,
field or whatever you call it in the top on in your app and on
exactly.
YouTube, so they will find it. Um. And then to finish off, I always ask every guest because I'm almost at episode 150, but I want to make a lot more. So, do you know any podcast host that I should also invite for this series?
Yeah, absolutely. And I did find it's episode 27. So you can't make
Okay,
friends in Denmark because you're a peach. It's episode 27.
all right.
Um, yeah. So a podcast that I love, and I know the two hosts. The one host I've known for years and years. We went to the same summer camp when we were kids in
Really?
Pennsylvania when I was back in the U.S. She moved to Copenhagen. We lost touch. She moved to Copenhagen. Uh, 3 months after I did, and then we reunited in Copenhagen. She's gone off to do wonderful things. She's a comedian, touring all over internationally, and she hosts a podcast with a very funny Danish comedian named Sophie Hagen, and Abby Wamba is the host of this podcast they do together called Help Hole. And the premise is they read different self-help books and then they discuss them on the show so that you don't have to read them.
Okay.
And they are both just hilarious and delightful to listen to. They are both comedians. One is Danish, one is American, and it's just a fantastic listen. And they're both super interesting. They both have really great stories. Abby, I know a little bit better because we've been friends for years. But Sophie is also a gem, and they, have a wonderful podcast called Help Hole, and I totally recommend checking them out as well.
Okay. Really cool. I'm already looking forward to that one.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Derek, for your time for this really cool conversation with lots of podcast tips again. And yeah, I hope you have a lot of fun also doing the live recording and the celebration for your 100th episode.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the
Also,
time, when this airs, it'll be just a few short weeks away. So,
yeah, it will be. But also don't forget to celebrate for yourself. Because you're doing the live recording and having a celebration with your community around the podcast, but also treat yourself to something nice for your 100th episode.
Thank you. That's actually that's really good advice. And
Yeah.
if you didn't say that, I honestly probably would not. So
Yeah, but it's important.
That's really good to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's important. I've already booked a restaurant because episode 150 is coming up somewhere also in May. And I've already booked a restaurant, a nice sushi restaurant to go out with my partner to celebrate that. Yeah. Yeah, he has nothing to do with my podcast, but yeah, I like to share my celebrations with him. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Better than eating sushi alone.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I don't have a co-host to share it with, so it's my partner. Yeah.
There you go.
So don't forget, do something for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really great advice. Yeah, keep that in mind.
All right.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Bye now.
Zo, die zit er weer op. Dankjewel voor het luisteren. Ik ben heel blij dat jij erbij was. En als je geen enkele nieuwe aflevering wil missen, volg dan deze podcast. En als je mij en mijn gast een heel groot plezier wil doen, dan maak je ons heel blij met het geven van 5 sterretjes in Spotify of een leuke review op Apple Podcasts of waar dat je ook luistert. En we vinden het ook altijd heel leuk om van jou te horen, dus stuur ons gerust een berichtje. Alle contactgegevens en linkjes staan in de show notes. Tot de volgende!